I had two bullets in the
Fuck you, boy. Shut your bitch ass up.
So, here is a video of a trans man. And for those of you all who don't know the difference, trans men are people who are born women and they transition into men, right? So, the caption of this video is trans men don't belong in women's spaces. And then it's like me when I'm in men's spaces, right? So, there's like a whole bunch of hullabaloo going on, screaming, ah, right? So, this trans man is saying that he is scared to be in space with cis men, people who were born men, right? And the comments were full of people agreeing. It was like, oh, yeah, I'm scared to be around men, so, yada, 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 right? And, oh, I got something to say about this. Because, you know, something I noticed is that trans women force themselves to be in women's spaces in a way that trans men do not force themselves to be in men's spaces. I wonder why that is. Oh, we got to talk about that. This is something I've noticed as a cisgender woman, right? Somebody who was born a woman. As somebody who was born a woman, I've noticed how trans women, people who were born men and now identify as women, they force themselves into women's spaces in a way that trans men do not force themselves into men's spaces, right? Like, you got a post by a trans man talking about, oh, yeah, I'd rather be in women's spaces because I'm scared of cis men, right? And trans men are deep in the comments agreeing with it. But you never see the opposite. You never see trans women talk about, yeah, I prefer men's spaces because I'm scared to be around women, yada, yada, yada. Nothing. None of that, right? Now, we about to have an honest and open discussion. Now, if you delusional and you just want to keep marching to your own drum, that's fine. You might not want to watch this video. But we're going to have an honest and open discussion here, right? I've made videos talking about this in the past, and I'm going to keep talking about it, okay? So let's really get into this. This is the facts. As soon as you are born, society begins to mold you into its perception of a boy or a girl, right? So as soon as I was born, the doctor said, oh, you have a girl, right? They looked at my parts and said, oh, it's a baby girl. And society began to mold me into a baby girl. The reverse is true for somebody who was born with opposite parts. Society looked at those parts and said, well, you got a boy, and began to mold these people into what they believed a boy should be, right? That is the facts. We can all acknowledge that boys and girls are raised differently. That is the honest to God truth. As soon as we are born. And like I'm sure you all can remember as far back into like early childhood, already understanding gender stereotypes. Like, let me give you all an example, right? Because I say this, kids recognize gender before they recognize race, okay? So I teach chess sometimes, and I go to these different schools, and sometimes I go out to like white and Asian schools, right? And I'll be working with like itty bitty kids, you know, like third graders and below. There was one school I went to. One boy asked me, are you the chess coach's sister? I was like, boy, why would I be the chess coach's sister? Like, why would the chess coach come in here and bring his or her sister? Like, what are you saying, right? But this boy looked at me and thought, well, a girl can't play chess, so this must be the chess coach's sister. Right now, again, he was a young boy. I don't remember how old he was, but again, he was itty bitty, right? And I've noticed that when I go out to those white and Asian schools, they don't really recognize that I'm black yet, right? So they don't say racist stuff or really understand race. And you know, there's a lot of like okay, because in chess you have white pieces and black pieces, right? And you notice when the kids start to notice race, because like by like fourth grade, maybe like third or fourth grade, right? You'll have the pieces and you'll say, oh, do you want to be white or black? And the kid will say, well, I gotta be white because I'm white, right? It'll be a white kid and they'll be like, well, you gotta have black pieces because you black, right? So you notice when they begin to notice race, they'll be confused by the question, do you want to be white or black? They'll be like, well, you're black, not realizing I'm talking about the pieces, right? They thinking about skin color, right? But before like third or fourth grade, they don't really recognize race, but they absolutely recognize my gender. I've had a lot of little boys say stuff about girls playing chess, and like that boy, oh, are you the chess coach's sister? Like, boy, what do you, like, that don't even make sense. Now, I'm saying that because those are young children and they've already been shaped and have these perceptions on gender, right? They already have this idea, girls don't play chess, boys play chess, right? They already have this perception, right? So this really, really highlights how even young children are shaped when it comes to gender. Now, this is not something that's unique to gender, okay? Because think about the house that you grew up in, right? Maybe you grew up in a house where people screamed a lot, or maybe there was a domestic violence issue, or maybe as you got older, you thought that was normal. You screamed at your significant other. Maybe you put your hands on your significant other because that's the type of household you grew up in, right? The point that I'm making is that these things that we are taught as children stick with us for the rest of our lives. Now, as an adult, there's been a lot of things I've begun to unpack about things I was conditioned into as a child, right? But sometimes, even at my big grown age, I'm 27 years old, right? Sometimes something happens and my first reaction is that reaction I was taught as a child. You know, like that first reaction, even after all of the unpacking and growing and introspection that I've done, sometimes that first reaction still comes. And then I'm like, oh no, that's not correct, right? You know, it's a battle that persists to this day, right? Now, I'm saying that because, again, depending on what gender you were born as, you were socialized in a certain way, right? And for somebody to sit here and pretend that you can just forget that socialization and suddenly you're just completely the same as the opposite gender, it's not a very nuanced take. I'm sorry. And now I'm saying this as somebody who was born a woman, right? And I have these conversations about trans women and, you know, cisgender women's spaces, right? And people will be like, well, trans women are women, so and so and so, yada, 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 right? And it's like, yeah, that's cute, but we cannot ignore the socialization we receive for our entire lives that makes sharing a space with people who receive the opposite socialization a little bit burdensome. Now, this is the thing. Whenever a biological woman complains about trans women deboing our spaces, everybody's response is, well, trans women are women. Get used to it. They belong there, right? But, trans men are sitting here saying they don't even really want to be in cis men's spaces, right? And nobody's responding, well, trans men are men. Get used to it. You better be in those spaces, right? No, everybody is reacting with understanding and saying, oh, well, you know, like, of course, trans men and cis men are different because they were raised differently, right? Of course, you may be uncomfortable in the presence of somebody who was raised as a biological male because of that difference in conditioning, right? There's so much understanding on that side of the spectrum. But when it's cisgender women saying, well, we're a little uncomfortable around people who were raised, you know, and conditioned as men, then suddenly it's, oh, you're just transphobic, so and so and so. Like, honestly, the math is not quite mathing. I've seen multiple instances of people who were born men and they may identify as trans women or non-binary or whatever, right? But they clearly still look like men. It look like a nigga, okay? Like you look at the person, you're like, hey, good gentleman, right? You know what I'm saying? There's no confusion. There's no, maybe that person is trying to be something else. No, right? So these people will make posts like, yeah, me when I go into the women's bathroom because who gonna stop me, right? And it'll be somebody with a damn beard. It's like you're not even attempting to assimilate into the space, right? You're playing in my face at this point, right? But again, you never see the reverse. You never see trans men who still look like women talking about, yeah, I'm finna go into the men's room because who gonna stop me? No, they be scared for their fucking lives. They be like, oh no, I don't pass. I still look like a woman. I'm not going in the men's room, right? There's a very clear difference, right? And honestly, it just feels like the patriarchy repainted. So you can look like a whole ass uncle and you can come into women's spaces and make women uncomfortable because I'm in the bathroom changing or whatever. I don't want to see somebody big brother. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to ask you, hey, are you somebody's brother or do you identify as their sister? I'm just not about to. That's just the reality of real life. That's not finna fucking happen, right? You know good and well you look like Unc in them and you in the women's bathroom. You know good and well you're going to make women uncomfortable, but you don't give a fuck. You don't give a fuck because it's not about you actually identifying as whatever or, you know, any of that. It's about you just taking over women's spaces. And honestly, we have to go back to how these people are raised because, again, these people were born and socialized as boys and men. So they're raised to commandeer women and talk over us and make us uncomfortable and all that other shit. Like, be so expeditiously for real with yourself. Like, I took a swimming class, that had to be like 2 years ago, right? Mind you, I still can't swim. That is so shameful. But, of course, before class, you got to change into your bathing suit. Now, a lot of women would change in the private stalls, but some women would change out, you know, in the locker room in public. Like, they would have their titties and stuff out. And, I mean, it's the women's locker room, so nobody was tripping, right? Imagine somebody in there with their dick out. And then they're like, well, I identify as... Don't nobody care, good chap. Nobody cares. Like, y'all just got to be rooted in reality. Like, I'm not saying that you can't exist. And, you know, like, I'm not saying that you have to 100% pass to be valid in your identity. But understand that you live in a society. I have to tell people that all the time. It's not even just about transgender versus cisgender or anything like that. You live in a society. And part of living in a society means that, you know, you're considerate of the people around you. That's part of just being social creatures, right? So even if you identify as whatever, you know... if you look in the mirror and you know good and well you don't look like that thing, then maybe you shouldn't be, commandeering the spaces of those people who were born as whatever. Maybe you shouldn't be talking over us. Maybe you shouldn't be deboing us out the way and hollering about how your voice matters more. Like maybe, just maybe,